The Silent Bird. Once upon a time, in a small, humble village nestled on the edge of an ancient forest, there lived a poor but kind-hearted farmer named Raghav. With salt and pepper hair, weathered skin, and eyes that held both wisdom and kindness, he worked tirelessly under the scorching sun and cold rain to grow crops on his small patch of land. Though he owned little, Raghav's heart was rich with compassion. One evening, as the golden hues of sunset melted into twilight, Raghav was returning home through the dense forest carrying a bundle of firewood. The cool evening air was filled with the faint chirping of crickets and the rustling of leaves. Suddenly, he heard the soft sound of a baby crying. Startled, he paused and listened intently. The cry was faint yet persistent, coming from somewhere deep within the forest. Guided by the sound, Raghav carefully made his way through the undergrowth. After some time, he spotted a tiny bundle lying beneath a towering tree. There, swaddled in a tattered cloth, was a fragile baby girl with deep, curious eyes and a face smeared with tears. Her tiny hands reached out as if searching for someone. Raghav knelt beside her, his heart aching. He looked around, calling out in hopes that her parents might be nearby, but the forest remained silent except for the baby's sobs. As the sky darkened and shadows crept closer, Raghav realized he could not leave her there. Wrapping her carefully in his shawl, he held her close to his chest and began walking home. Back at his modest cottage, Raghav gently laid the baby on his worn-out bedding. The warm glow of a flickering oil lamp cast soft shadows across the room. He fed her a little warm milk and watched as her tiny eyes finally closed in sleep. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Raghav searched tirelessly for her parents, asking villagers, visiting nearby towns, but no one knew anything about the baby. Over time, Raghav accepted the little girl as his own daughter and named her Kohu, after the sweet call of the forest cuckoo. He poured all his love and care into raising her, working even harder to ensure she had enough to eat and wear. Kohu grew into a gentle and beautiful child with long, flowing black hair and a radiant smile. However, as she began to grow older, Raghav noticed something peculiar. Kohu never spoke. At first, he thought she was just shy, but as years passed, it became clear that Kohu could not speak at all. The realization weighed heavily on Raghav's heart. Yet, Kohu remained cheerful, expressing herself through her bright eyes and her warm smile. The villagers adored her and fondly called her the Silent Bird. Despite her silence, Kohu had a melodious presence. She would hum softly while tending to flowers, her gestures graceful like a swan gliding across a lake. The villagers would often gather to watch her dance under the moonlight, her movements filled with an inexplicable magic. Far away, in the royal palace of the kingdom, trouble was brewing. The young prince, heir to the throne, had fallen gravely ill. No doctor, sage, or healer could determine the cause of his ailment. The king and queen, desperate and grief-stricken, prayed day and night for a miracle. One night, as the moon shone brightly over the palace, a celestial fairy appeared in the king's dreams. Her silvery hair glistened like stardust, and her voice was as soft as a breeze. "Your son can be healed," she said. "But only the touch of the Silent Bird can cure him." When the king awoke, he immediately ordered messengers to spread the word across the kingdom. Whoever knew about the Silent Bird was to report to the palace at once. The news eventually reached Raghav's village. Though hesitant, Raghav knew he had to try. With hope in his heart, he dressed Kohu in her best modest dress and set off for the palace. They traveled for days, crossing rivers and forests, until they finally stood before the grand gates of the royal palace. The king, robed in crimson and gold, looked upon them with piercing eyes. Seeing a mute girl instead of a bird, he frowned in disappointment and anger. "Is this some sort of trick?" he roared. Before Raghav could explain, guards seized them and threw them into the palace dungeons. The cold stone walls echoed with silence as Raghav sat beside Kohu, his heart heavy with despair. But then, something extraordinary happened. In the dead of night, a soft, sweet melody began to float through the dungeon. It was Kohu. Her voice, clear and heavenly, carried a song so beautiful that even the guards outside stopped to listen. The song spoke of healing, of love, and of hope. It was as if the forest, the stars, and the heavens themselves had come together to sing through her. The king, hearing the enchanting song, rushed to the dungeon. He stood frozen as he watched Kohu sing, her voice glowing with a golden aura. Realizing the truth of the prophecy, the king took Kohu to the prince's chamber. As she gently touched the prince's forehead, a miracle occurred. Color returned to his pale cheeks, his breathing steadied, and his eyes fluttered open. The kingdom rejoiced, and the king, overwhelmed with gratitude, asked Raghav for Kohu's hand in marriage to the prince. With Raghav's blessing, the prince and Kohu were wed in a grand ceremony filled with music, flowers, and joy. From that day forward, Kohu became not just a princess but a symbol of hope and healing. Raghav, now treated with honor and respect, spent his days peacefully in the royal gardens. And so, the girl once known as the Silent Bird became the voice of love, courage, and miracles for an entire kingdom. And they all lived happily ever after.